Oh, I'm live with Jeff. There you go, there's Bud over here, and I'm gonna do the trademark, semi-trademark zoom out effect. Right, I'll read through this. Unless you want to do the Rod Serling voice, yeah?
No, but the title is Execution.
Yes, I'll just. Yes?
Written by Rod Serling.
Yes. Based on an unpublished story by George Clayton Johnson. Starring Albert Salmi as Joe Caswell. Have you seen him in other things, Albert Salmi?
Not that I know of, but the guy who was like the scientist or whatever looked very familiar.
Yeah. I think Than Wayne. I don't know if you can see that. I'll zoom in a bit. There's the cast.
I don't see the name you said. Oh.
Probably George Mannion. But I'll have a look when I get to the plot details. We'll get the guy. Oh, yeah, Professor Mannion. Yeah, so George Mannion. Russell Johnson. Right then. Commonplace if someone... Oh, wait a minute, I forgot the voice. Commonplace if somewhat grim, unsocial event, known as a necktie party. The guest of dishonor, a cowboy named Joe Caswell, just a moment away from a rope, a short distance several feet off the ground, and then the dark eternity of all evil men. Mr. Joe Caswell, who, when the good Lord passed out a conscience, a heart, a feeling for fellow men, must have been out for a beer and missed out. Mr. Joe Caswell, in the last minute of a violent life. His intros can be difficult. Right. In 1880, Joe Caswell is about to be hanged for shooting a man in the back. But as the noose tightens around his neck, Caswell disappears and reappears in the modern laboratory of Professor Mannion, inventor of the time machine that has saved his neck by plucking him at random out of the past. Seeing the rope burns and surmising that Caswell is one of life's more dangerous people, Mannion attempts to send him back. The two men struggle. Caswell hits Mannion over the head with a heavy lamp because he saw that he looked like he was going for a gun. Caswell hits Mannion over the head with a heavy lamp and runs out onto a busy city street. Overwhelmed by lights and the noise, Caswell soon returns to the laboratory to seek Mannion's aid. But his blow has killed the scientist. Then Paul Johnson, a petty thief, enters the lab. Caswell grapples with him for his gun. Johnson strangles Caswell with the draw cord of a curtain. That might have been a bit more convincing if the thief was a bit bigger. But in looking for a hidden safe, Johnson unwittingly activates the time machine. He is sent back to 1880, appearing in the noose meant for Caswell and meeting the fate intended for the other man. This is November 1880, the aftermath of a necktie party. The victim's name, Paul Johnson, a minor league criminal and the taker of another human life. No comment on his death save this. Justice can span years. Retribution is not subject to a calendar. Tonight's case in point in the Twilight Zone. Over to you, Jeff.
When people talk about, they liked TV back when it was wholesome family entertainment without violence and stuff. This is the kind of episode they're obviously talking about.
Yeah.
No, it actually surprised me how, it was like this one could have been titled Random Violence and Not So Random Violence.
I thought the action was well done. Yeah, sorry to talk over you. Sorry.
Oh, they're just saying that was most of the episode. So that reminds me a little of that movie, The Incredible Hulk, which was like a series of fight scenes followed by a series of chase scenes, or vice versa. So yeah, I obviously I've never read the short story that this was based on or whatever, but I would say that it definitely didn't seem to be a finished idea because it just seemed so random.
Yeah.
Sort of pieced together from things and not really much coherence to it.
I personally thought that I like the actor that played the part of Caswell. I thought he had some menace about him. I like the voice that he put on. It mentions that in the review. That he had a sort of a voice that was sort of different. Well, he wasn't too contemporary. And I thought the action was well done for the time. What do you think of those two aspects, Jeff? The acting and the action.
Well, I mean, there wasn't anybody that stood out as not being convincing as the characters they were playing. There just wasn't a whole lot to them. So, all they really established about Caswell is that he's a ruthless guy who killed people and did whatever he wanted to, basically. And even that, it's like we're kind of taking his word for it because we don't really know the details of any of that stuff. And there's certainly no depth given to the scientist guy. It's like he describes it as 80 years later, so it's trying to say, like in 1960 or whatever, that this random scientist has a time machine that anybody can just walk in off the street and activate. So it's the Twilight Zone, but it's like you want like a certain amount of realism to things to make it have any kind of, I don't know, substance to it or whatever. And this is just sort of what? This just seems just pretty far-fetched in all aspects.
I mean, that's a pretty good stunt, isn't it? You got a person there. Whatever comes out of that could hurt the other person. So, just from I think if somebody did that on a stage, in a stage play, they would be pretty impressed, the audience.
Yeah, we wouldn't have done it at the community theater that I did plays at because it would have been too expensive to keep breaking that every night. Too much broken stuff.
Yeah, I also like the bit when he had the fight with the guy and he just lifted him across the desk. Because we've watched stuff from this era where the fighting can be pretty bad, especially in the English stuff.
It was realistic in the sense that this dude from the 1880s cowboy time or whatever, didn't waste any time like threatening the dude. He just went ahead and started clocking him. It's like I'm in a situation where this dude's about to pull his gun. I'm going to take him out. So that part was obviously convincing compared to the other guy who, I guess he could have been a thief that just wasn't very good. He's used to doing like what he said. He's used to coming in places there isn't anybody, so he's not used to having to fight anybody. But yeah, I kind of agree with you about the second hanging or whatever, and with the curtain cord or whatever it was. It didn't seem very convincing, but some of the other stuff was. And I don't know. I guess I expected when the other guy appeared at the end, like there would be a little bit more of, that especially like the preacher guy would have been, trying to come up with some sort of forced explanation from the Bible or something. Instead, he's just like, I don't know.
I mean, they could have cut this section with the bar and had a little bit more dialogue with the burglar.
They didn't mention that in the description, but to me that was the funniest part. Like that was the best part of having. He turns on the TV and it's randomly a cowboy dude like coming directly at the screen. I'm like, that's kind of a clever concept. Whoever came up with that.
There was footage of that in the United States. I think it was true. I think maybe I don't know who did it as a trick, but they had the audience there at the cinema and they had a train coming towards the screen.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that can be effective when it's done well, and in the brief moment they needed it to be that in this show it was. So.
I mean, if you look at this guy on screen, he's not convincing enough that he's going to strangle this big guy They needed to get an equally big guy to do it. If you think that.
Yeah, well, I guess, from what he said at the end, it seemed like the point they were trying to make is like that you don't have to be a big tough dude, because it's more about what the choices of what you do as far as what happens to you than it is like anything about your specific self.
Yeah, and when I watched it, I wasn't thinking, oh, he got strangled too easily. It just mentioned that in the book. I was just thinking that maybe for those people that thought it was too easy.
Yeah,
But
I
he was.
almost feel like they probably they didn't make up their mind what they wanted the big twist to be. It's like, did we want it to be, oh, the irony of he gets hanged anyway, or that we have the other guy go back in time and get, it's like they try to pull off both of them, and it sort of takes some of the impact away from both.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this bit
do a little too much.
I mean, I thought this bit was good, where he just drags him across the desk, and part of that is the other actor playing it in terms of selling it. But I thought that was very good, for the time.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where nowadays, if they redid it, they might make it more of a, I don't know what the word is, a statement more on current society.
Oh God!
In terms of the way we treat criminals or something. In terms of like, they could have, the police do get the guy rather than he gets, strangled by the other guy, but they have him in custody, and he says something about how he's going to get hanged by them, and they say something like, "Oh, we don't do that anymore. Now we do like a lethal injection or something." And they, they basically like try to establish the same theme of like justice not changing over time, just in terms of the method.
Although they had the electric chair for a long time, for a while.
But that's what I mean, is like sort of the juxtaposition of people being like, oh, this primitive way of meting out justice, and now we're all enlightened and superior or whatever, so this is how we do it now, kind of thing.
I think the last hanging in England was in the 60s.
Yeah, well, I don't know when it was in the U.S., so I can't comment on that. Or at least officially. Obviously, unofficially, it could happen anytime. But
because I think they had the electric chair in the 20s and 30s. And I remember the film The Green Mile.
More recently than that here. I know there was still, I think Florida or somewhere was using the electric chair, at least into the 90s. I don't think it was often, but it was sort of there was at least one state where they actually gave the person condemned to die the choice. Like they had an option of whether or not they were going to do like electric chair or firing squad or something like that. I don't remember how. Anyway.
Did you see the film The Green Mile?
Yes.
And I'll just say for the audience that there was an interesting bit where they said that when they're sort of like how a metal cap, and they're supposed to put a wet sponge underneath between the cap and the head. And one of the things in the movie is you have one of the little guys, and he gets scared by the sort of humiliated by the guy who's going to be executed. And so what he does is he decides to put the sponge on without it being wet. And so what it means is it's a slow, painful, frying kind of death in the electric chair because of the dry sponge. So just a little bit of trivia there.
More uplifting messages.
Right, so what have I put here? There's not much. There's only 2 paragraphs in the review. The stunts were good. Telephone box, lamp smashed near head. Fights for the time. I don't know what that means. I confused myself. Then here we go. The first episode produced in February, number 27 in order of production, execution proved one of Serling's lesser efforts. In George Clayton Johnson's original unpublished story, two modern scientists use a time machine to yank a 19th century killer out of a hangman's noose and into the present. Soon, the scientists realize that they've made a mistake and have unwittingly let loose a violent primitive. Ultimately, the man is shot to death by a policeman and reappears back in the noose, the cycle complete. In adapting the story into a teleplay, Serling added verbiage and contrivance, eliminating one of the scientists in the show, and the remaining scientist is played by Russell Johnson, later the professor on Gilligan's Island. Did you watch that, Jeff?
Yeah, that's probably where I recognized him from.
No. And adding a modern-day criminal who strangles the man from the past with ludicrous ease. I didn't think it was that ludicrous. I didn't draw my attention at the time and go, oh, come off it. In particular, Serling's edition of the burglar, obviously intended as Caswell's modern counterpart, makes the piece seem cluttered and unbalanced. Do you agree with that, Jeff?
I mean, partially. I don't think that just adding the burglar itself does that, but just the way that they did it was kind of clunky.
Yeah. They could have had better dialogue between the two.
Yeah, it just comes off as unfinished to me, like incoherent in some ways. It's just like they kind of pieced together at the last minute and not really much thought gone into making things fit together well, which is unusual for Twilight Zone and the ones we've seen so far, because even in the ones that were, boring or somewhat cringeworthy for some reason, they still, like, for the most part, the story seemed to fit together.
Right.
Just had other weaknesses, where this one really seemed very haphazard.
I would say that, though, I mean, even Star Trek, and the people on Star Trek would complain about, oh, we do 26, everybody else only does 21 or 20 or 22. We do 26 episodes a year. And this is the 27th. And Rod Serling was writing most of them. And you remember in Doctor Who was about 35 episodes in the 60s. Fewer stories, of course, but then a lot of episodes.
Yeah, it's easy to come up with that many different storylines. Because at least with Doctor Who, it was a serial thing where you had, kind of groups of usually 4 or 6 episodes most of the time.
Yeah, and done by different writers as well. And a lot of times the script editor had to do a lot of work on it because a lot of the writers were probably a bit NT-ish, and the way they were commissioned. Anyhow, that's all in the Doctor Who handbooks if people are interested, as the series that came out in the 1990s. Written by David J. Howe, Mark Stammers, I believe. This bit here. Playing 19th century killer Joe Caswell was Albert Salmi, a fine character actor who deserves better roles than he usually gets. Here he gives Caswell an air of authority, speaking with an archaic accent and moving with the menacing body language of a man long used to violence. His is a faultless performance, but it is not enough to overcome a poorly adapted script. I mean, I liked his performance a lot, and performances were important to me.
Yeah, I generally agree with that.
I think also the idea of it. There's certain ideas that are interesting, and it doesn't really matter that much how badly they're done. Unless it's like horrendously bad. Well, what I sort of mean is, if it's an interesting idea and it's done in an average way, I'm sort of okay with it. It might depend on the mood I'm in.
Yeah, I guess I would have liked to seen a little bit more sense of urgency from anybody except for the Caswell. It seemed like everybody else was just sort of gliding along.
Yeah, and
Like it almost could have been one where they had the, it'd be a dream at the end or something because people were just kind of acting like things were no big deal.
I think if I was a script editor on it, I would have asked, let's make the thief kind of different. Let's make the criminal kind of different. Let's make him a little bit smoother.
Yeah, and he's too casual, and so is this. Like I said, the scientist has this time machine in 1960, but he's just like nobody working with him. And it says the original at least had two scientists. This is like this one guy, and he apparently has this place right next to the street where you can just kind of stroll in, because they don't even have anything implying that the thief guy broke in any way. If he did, it was maybe he picked a lock or something. There's certainly not much security or any security at this time machine. That who knows how much it cost to make and where this guy got the funding. And he's just sort of like, I brought you here because I felt like it.
Yeah, but Jeff, we said that. Yeah.
I think maybe you're a bad guy, so I'm going to send you back.
Yeah.
I'll very slowly reach for my gun.
Well, strengths and weaknesses of ENTPs. But we've seen that cliche a lot. Like you've got the amateur inventor who builds something.
But even that, I mean,
remarkable.
You make him, if you're going to make him kind of unaware of, I don't know how to react to reality in a sense. Then make him more of a Doc Brown kind of mad scientist dude and stuff.
Right.
Instead, he's like, I'm intense guy who says things about what I'm doing, but I have like no urgency about anything.
Well, I mean, like I said, they could have cut that scene out with the bar.
He could even have like one throwaway line about how he used to work with the other scientist, and that guy was the brains behind the operation, so he doesn't know what to do anymore.
Yeah.
He just said my partner had a tragic accident when we tried to send him through time or something. It could have been something to, I don't know, to explain that better. But like I said, it's just kind of incoherent, haphazard. So.
Yeah, but I don't know that. I mean, yeah, it is a bit of a cliche that you have these people who invent things, and especially when you're younger, when you're a little kid, and you see these things, you don't think, where did they get all their resources from to build this? And it was an elaborate set. At least when we see the other sort of like nutty professor things, it's a little bit more Heath Robinson, kind of like more put together. Whereas that looked like an elaborate place. So then it becomes a question of maybe I could put a line in there about.
He doesn't even say why.
I won the lottery.
Why did he select him? How did if he didn't know what he was getting? He just selected a random point in history and said, "I'm gonna bring somebody from this point in history from wherever they are."
Yeah, I think there's lots of NTs who are stupid enough to do that.
And then somehow just expect everything will go A-okay with this. It can't possibly be anybody dangerous or anybody that's going to freak out and kill me in a few seconds.
Yeah, but there's loads of like an ENTP would do that, It's like, oh, what could happen? I
don't know about that. I'm going to give a little more credit to ENTPs that most of them, if they somehow had the ability to create this time machine, they would have a little bit more forethought or preparation in what they were going to do with what happened, or just be completely crazy. You got to go one way or the other.
Right.
You make him completely loony, and the guy comes and he's like, "Yes, I have done it!" And he's just like an insane dude. Then you're like, "Okay, that guy I can buy, not really thinking about this guy." It's like.
I see what you mean.
That's why I say incoherent or incongruous. To use another word, it's like this guy doesn't seem like he would have gotten himself to this position.
Gotcha.
In order to be as weak as he isn't responding to it. Either he's going to be a more manic, insane guy who doesn't think about consequences of anything. And that could be another, thing following the plot. It's like this guy's not exactly the the nicest guy either. Maybe he's killed a bunch of people experimenting on things or whatever, and he's, you know, one and the same. But instead, they make him be like, I've brought you here for no apparent reason. And now I see marks on your neck that make it look like you were going to be killed for something. So you're evil, and I'm sending you back. Oh no, don't kill me.
Yeah, and he tells him. Instead of saying, if you would like to go, there's something I need to show you inside the machine. And it's like, back. Use some tactics.
And things like that is really going to go over well with the guy.
Yeah, he tells him, yeah. If he really was going to do that, then you don't tell him you're going to do that.
Yeah.
Say, hey, let me take you over here to this nice little booth where it'll give you free whiskey. Yeah, that's totally what it's for. And then you hit the button and send him back. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to send you back, dangerous guy who could kill me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could say... Yeah, do you want to look at this drinks cabinet over there?
So it's like, this guy does not seem smart enough to have made a time machine. But like I
Yeah.
said, you could take care of that if you had one line about him saying, you know, somebody else actually built the time machine and he's just somehow in charge of it.
Even that, though, to me, the lack of intelligence came through where he saw the mark around his neck and he knows he's bringing someone from the past. It's like, how does he think he's got a rope mark around his neck and he can hardly talk? It's been good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of them. So, I actually give it about... I actually like that speech. I like the performance in that bit where he's talking about doing what he needed to survive. And he says, those are fine words. They go down easy. When, you know, I thought that was a bit about they go down easy. So I give it about 7 out of 10 because I like the way the action was done, and I like the performance of the guy playing Caswell.
I will give it a 5.
Ooh.
Because it's like, that's, you know, the edge of where I wouldn't call it bad. I would just say it's not good. So there you go. There are good elements. There are amusing parts. Some things that are well done that keep it from being something I would call bad. But it's overall boring and kind of disjointed. And so it doesn't really tell a very good story. And, you know.
Now, I've seen the picture that's in the book for the next episode, and it looks like it's got something in it that we've not had so far.
Okay, well, join us then for The Big Tall Wish.
All right then. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye.